The cargo ship Wandering Star moved slowly through the darkness of space like a tired whale swimming through an endless ocean. It was an old ship with rusty walls and engines that made strange sounds every few hours. Captain Rachel had been flying this route for 12 years, and she knew every crack and rattle of her beloved vessel. The ship carried medical supplies to a small colony on the edge of known space. It was boring work, but it paid well, and Rachel liked boring. Boring meant safe. Boring meant everyone went home alive. There were 12 passengers on board this trip. Most of them were workers heading to the colony for jobs. Some were scientists. One was a priest who spent most of his time praying in his small cabin. And then there was the quiet man in cabin 7. His name was David. At least that was what his ticket said. He was average height with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to look through things rather than at them. He wore simple clothes that looked like they came from a cheap store. He smiled politely at everyone, but never started conversations. Rachel noticed him on the first day. There was something wrong about him. Not bad wrong, just different. He moved too smoothly, like water flowing over rocks. When he walked down the corridor, his footsteps made almost no sound. His eyes would flick to doorways and corners before the rest of his head turned. On the third day of the journey, something happened that made Rachel pay closer attention. James the engineer was moving a heavy supply crate in the cargo bay. The magnetic locks failed, and the crate fell sideways. It weighed about 300 pounds, and it was falling directly toward Amy, a young crew member who was checking inventory below. Rachel saw it happen from across the bay. She opened her mouth to scream a warning, but she knew it was too late. Amy was going to die. Then David appeared. He had been reading a book on the other side of the cargo bay, at least 50 feet away. But suddenly he was there. He caught the falling crate with one hand and set it down gently on the floor. His book was still in his other hand. He had not even lost his page. Amy stared at him with her mouth open. James dropped his tools. Rachel felt her heart pounding in her chest. David just smiled that polite smile of his. "That was close," he said. "You should be more careful with the locks." Then he walked away, still reading his book like nothing had happened. That night, Rachel pulled up his passenger file on her computer. David Miller. Age 34. Occupation listed as freight consultant. No criminal record. No military service. Nothing interesting at all. It was too clean. Too empty. Real people had messy histories. Real people had parking tickets and old jobs and social media accounts. This file looked like someone had created it yesterday. Rachel decided to watch. And more carefully. Emily, the ship medic, was young and friendly and curious about everyone. She made it her mission to learn the stories of all the passengers. Most people loved talking to her. She had a warm smile, and she actually listened when people spoke. David was her biggest challenge. She found him in the observation lounge every evening. He always sat in the same chair facing the big window that showed the stars outside. He was always reading a different book. Philosophy one night. Poetry the next. History after that. May I sit with you? Emily asked one evening. David looked up from his book. Of course, he said. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Emily watched the stars. David read his pages. Finally, she worked up the courage to ask questions. What do you do for work? She asked. I am afraid. Consultant, he said. What does that mean exactly? Help companies move things from one place to another safely. That sounds interesting, she said, even though it did not sound interesting at all. David smiled. It is very boring, actually. That is why I like it. Emily tried a different approach. Where are you from originally? Earth, he said. A small town. You would not have heard of it. What did you do before you became a consultant? David paused. His eyes went distant for just a moment. Government work, he said finally. Nothing exciting. Emily knew he was lying. She did not know how she knew, but she was certain. This quiet man with his polite smile and his philosophy books was hiding something big. Meanwhile, James had discovered something troubling. He was running routine diagnostics on the communication systems when he found an extra signal. Someone on the ship was broadcasting an encrypted message to an unknown location. He traced the signal to somewhere in the passenger section, but he could not identify the exact source. The encryption was military grade, far beyond anything a normal person should have access to. James reported this to Captain Rachel. Immediately. Someone is tracking us, Rachel said. Or tracking someone on board. Should we confront the passengers? James asked. Rachel shook her head. Not yet. We do not know who it is or why. Let us watch and wait. But they did not have time to wait. On the 7th day of the journey, the proximity alarms started screaming. Rachel ran to the bridge and felt her blood turn to ice when she saw the sensor readings. 3 ships had dropped out of hyperspace directly in front of them. They were not Alliance military. They were not registered merchants. They were unmarked warships with weapons already powered and aimed at the wandering star. The communication screen crackled to life. A cold female voice filled the bridge. Cargo vessel wandering star. You are ordered to stop your engines and prepare for boarding. You have something that belongs to us. Surrender the asset immediately or we will take it by force. You have 60 seconds to comply. Rachel looked at her crew. Their faces were pale with fear. She had seen pirates before, but these were not pirates. Pirates wanted cargo. These ships wanted something specific. Something they called an asset. What do we do? Captain James whispered. Before Rachel could answer, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw David standing in the doorway of the bridge. He was not reading his book anymore. His hands were empty and relaxed at his sides, but something had changed. His posture was different. His eyes were different. He looked like the same man, but he felt like something else entirely. Something dangerous. He looked at the enemy ships on the screen. Then he looked at Rachel. Captain, he said calmly, I am going to handle this. I need you to gather everyone in the main cargo bay. Lock the doors from inside. Do not open them for anyone except me. Rachel stared at him. Who the hell are you? She demanded. David was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled off his simple civilian jacket. Underneath his shirt, Rachel could see scars. Dozens of them. Surgical scars covering his arms and disappearing under his collar. My name is not important, he said. What matters is what I am. Project Prometheus. Batch 7. Serial number redacted. I was supposed to be decommissioned 5 years ago. I decided to retire instead. He walked toward the airlock where the enemy boarding pods would connect. Stay hidden, he said over his shoulder. This will not take long. Rachel watched him go. She did not understand what was happening, but she understood one thing clearly. The quiet man in cabin 7 was not a freight consultant, and whatever was coming through that airlock was about to learn that the hard way. The boarding pods hit the wandering star with 3 loud crashes that shook the entire ship. Each pod carried 8 heavily armed soldiers wearing black armor with no markings. They were professionals trained to kill quickly and efficiently. They had done this dozens of times before. They had never faced anything like David. The first pod opened in Corridor 7. 8 soldiers poured out with their weapons raised and their eyes scanning for targets. The corridor was empty. The lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows on the metal walls. The squad leader raised his fist, signaling his team to stop. Something felt wrong. The ship should have been full of screaming civilians running in panic. Instead, there was only silence. Then the lights went out completely. The soldiers activated their helmet lights, but the beams only showed empty corridor ahead and behind. One soldier turned to check their rear. He was gone before he could scream. The squad leader spun around. 7 soldiers. Then 6. The darkness was eating his team one by one. He heard brief sounds of impact. Soft thuds. A single cut-off gasp. But he never saw what was taking them. When his helmet light found David, the man was standing 3 feet away, perfectly still. He was not even breathing hard. Around him lay 7 unconscious soldiers. The whole thing had taken less than 12 seconds. The squad leader raised his weapon, but his hands were shaking. "What are you?" he whispered. David tilted his head slightly. "I am the reason your organization has nightmares," he said. Then he moved. The squad leader did not even see the blow coming. On the command ship, a woman named Victoria watched the helmet camera feeds with growing fury. She was the leader of the Crimson Syndicate, a ruthless organization that dealt in weapons and stolen military secrets. She had been hunting this particular ghost for 3 years. They called him the Shepherd in their files. A single operative who had destroyed an entire syndicate base by himself. He had killed 47 of her best soldiers and disappeared into the darkness like smoke. No one knew his real name. No one knew where he came from. He was just a legend. A monster story that soldiers told each other in whispers. Now she was watching him tear through her boarding parties like they were children. The second pod team lasted slightly longer. They had spread out and created overlapping fields of fire. They followed perfect tactical protocol. None of it mattered. David came through the ceiling. He dropped into the middle of their formation and became a blur of precise violence. He did not fight like a normal soldier. There was no wasted movement. No hesitation. Every strike was calculated to disable with minimum effort. He used their own weapons against them. He turned their formations into chaos. Victoria watched one camera feed show a soldier firing wildly at shadows. Another showed a man screaming as his rifle was twisted from his hands and used to knock him unconscious. A third simply went black. In 90 seconds, all 8 soldiers were down. "Send the third team," Victoria ordered. Her voice was calm, but her hands gripped the armrests of her command chair until her knuckles turned white. "Ma'am," one of her officers said nervously. "Maybe we should reconsider. He's just one man, but he has already taken out 16 of our best." Victoria turned to look at him with eyes as cold as deep space. "He has information I need," she said. "The location of other Prometheus facilities. Do you know how much that information is worth? Enough to buy a planet. Send the third team. And tell them to use the gas." Back on the Wandering Star, Captain Rachel had gathered everyone in the main cargo bay as David had instructed. The passengers huddled together looking terrified. Amy was crying quietly. James kept checking the door locks over and over. Only Emily seemed calm. She stood near the door, listening to the distant sounds of combat. Thuds. Crashes. Then, silence. "What is he?" Rachel asked her quietly. Emily had spent the most time with David. Maybe she knew something. Emily shook her head slowly. "I do not know exactly. But I think he is something the military made. Something they were not supposed to make. And I think those people out there made a terrible mistake coming for him." The sounds of fighting had stopped. Rachel did not know if that was good or bad. Then there was a knock on the cargo bay door. 3 slow knocks. Then 2 fast ones. That was the signal David had told her to listen for. Rachel unlocked the door. It slid open to reveal David standing in the corridor. His civilian shirt was torn, and there was a cut on his forehead that was bleeding slightly. Behind him, the corridor was filled with unconscious soldiers in black armor, 24 of them, piled up like broken toys. Everyone stared in shocked silence. David stepped into the cargo bay, dragging one of the soldiers behind him. "This one is still conscious," he said. "He might have useful information." Rachel found her voice. "What the hell just happened out there?" David set the soldier down against the wall. The Crimson Syndicate, she said. They deal in military secrets. They want what is in my head. Specifically, they want to know where other facilities like the one that made me are located. Made you, Emily repeated softly. David looked at her. His eyes were tired, sad. Yes, he said. Made me. I was not born this way. I was built. Rebuilt, actually. Many times over many years. They took a normal child and turned him into this. He gestured at himself. A weapon that looks like a person. The wounded soldier on the floor laughed weakly. You think this is over, he said. Victoria will not stop. She will blow this whole ship apart before she lets you escape. David crouched down to look at the soldier. Then I will have to go to her, he said simply. Rachel grabbed his arm. Are you insane? There are 3 warships out there. Even if you are whatever you are, you cannot fight an entire fleet. David gently removed her hand. I was not planning to fight the fleet, he said. Just the people on it. One ship at a time. He walked toward the airlock where one of the boarding pods was still attached. Rachel and the others followed him. What are you going to do? Emily asked. David checked the pod controls. I am going to take their escape pod and fly it back to their command ship. They will not shoot something so small. By the time they realize I'm inside, it will be too late. That is suicide, James said. David smiled slightly. It would be for a normal person, he agreed. He turned to look at all of them one last time. Lock this door. Do not open it until you hear the all-clear signal from me or from an Alliance patrol. If I do not come back in 2 hours, assume I failed and surrender to save yourselves. He climbed into the boarding pod. David, Emily called out. He paused and looked at her. Why are you doing this? You could have stayed hidden. You could have let them search the ship and pretended to be nobody. David was quiet for a moment. Because you were kind to me, he said finally. You all were. You treated me like a person. Not like a weapon. Not like a monster. That is worth protecting. The pod door closed. A moment later, it detached from the wandering star and began flying toward the enemy fleet. Rachel watched it go on the bridge monitors. One tiny metal container heading toward 3 massive warships. She had never been a religious person. But right now she was praying. 15 years ago, in a place that did not exist on any map, a boy woke up in a white room. He did not remember his name. He did not remember his parents. He did not remember anything before the white room and the bright lights and the doctors in masks. They called him 7, just a number. One of 47 children selected from orphanages across Earth. They told him he was special. They told him he was going to save humanity. They told him it would hurt. They were right about the last part. The first surgery happened when he was 8 years old. They opened up his bones and filled them with metal alloys that would not break. He screamed for 3 days. The doctors took notes and adjusted their formulas. The second surgery came 6 months later. They rewired his nervous system to make his reflexes faster. He could catch a fly out of the air with his eyes closed. He could feel someone walking toward him from 100 feet away. He could not sleep without nightmares anymore. By the time he was 12, he had survived 19 surgeries. His muscles had been enhanced with synthetic fibers. His eyes had been modified to see in the dark and track motion that normal humans could not detect. His brain had been implanted with processors that let him calculate trajectories and analyze threats faster than any computer. They trained him every day. Weapons, combat, infiltration, languages. He learned to kill in 400 different ways. He learned to survive in any environment. He learned to ignore pain until it became just another piece of information. But 7 was different from the others. Between training sessions, he found books. An old guard who felt sorry for him would sneak them into his cell. Philosophy first, then poetry, Then history. Stories about people who were more than just weapons. He read about a shepherd boy who killed a giant with a stone and became a king. He liked that story. It made him think that maybe he could be more than what they made him. The other subjects did not read. They did not ask questions. They followed orders and killed when told to kill and died when their bodies gave out. By the time 7 turned 18, only 11 of the original 47 were still alive. Then came the termination order. The Prometheus program had been deemed too dangerous. The enhanced soldiers were unstable. 3 of them had gone rogue and killed their handlers. The government decided it was easier to destroy all of them than to risk more incidents. 7 learned about the order from the old guard who brought him books. "Run," he whispered through the cell door. "Tonight, I will leave your door unlocked. Get as far away as you can." 7 did not ask why the guard was helping him. He already knew. In 5 years of bringing books, the old man had started to see 7 as a person. Not as a subject. Not as a weapon. As a scared kid who liked poetry and asked too many questions. That night 7 escaped. He killed 12 soldiers on his way out. He did not want to kill them, but they stood between him and freedom, and his training took over before he could stop it. He ran for 3 years. Changed his appearance. Created false identities. Learned to act normal. Learned to smile and make small talk and pretend to be the kind of person who had never tasted blood. He chose the name David, after the shepherd who killed giants. Now, 15 years later, David was flying toward an enemy warship in a stolen boarding pod. The memories of the White Room felt very close. The doctors. The surgeries. The endless pain. He had spent so long trying to forget what he was. Trying to be just a quiet man who read books and helped move cargo. But you cannot escape what they built into your bones. The command ship grew larger in the pod window. Victoria was waiting for him in there. She wanted the locations of other Prometheus facilities. She wanted to find more children like him and turn them into weapons she could sell. David would not let that happen. Even if it killed him. The pod slammed into the command ship hull. David had aimed for a maintenance airlock on the lower deck. Less guards. Easier access to the internal systems. He cut through the airlock with a plasma torch he had taken from one of the unconscious soldiers. Alarms started screaming immediately. Red lights flashed in the corridors. He could hear boots running toward his position. Good. Let them come. The first squad arrived in 45 seconds. 6 soldiers with heavy weapons and full body armor. They had been briefed about him. They knew he was dangerous. They thought they were ready. They were not. David moved through them like wind through leaves. He did not use weapons. He did not need to. His hands were faster than their eyes could track. His body twisted around their gunfire like he knew where the bullets would be. Before they left the barrels. In 8 seconds, they were all down. Alive but unconscious. David did not kill unless he had to. That was the one thing he had chosen for himself. The one piece of humanity he had managed to keep. He moved deeper into the ship. More soldiers came. More soldiers fell. The corridors behind him filled with sleeping bodies. The ship intercom crackled to life. Victoria's voice echoed through the halls. "I know you can hear me, Shepherd. Yes, I know what they called you. I have read your file. Or what little of it exists. They made you to be the perfect soldier. Faster than thought. Stronger than steel. But you have a weakness, do you not? You care. You could have disappeared and let us take that cargo ship. But you had to play hero." David kept moving. He found a computer terminal and plugged in a data chip he had prepared months ago. "Just in case. You want to know something funny?" Victoria continued. "I was in the military once. I saw what programs like Prometheus did to people. The screaming. The bodies. The children who went in and the monsters that came out. I decided if monsters were being made, I might as well profit from them. The data chip finished its work. David had uploaded a virus that would disable the ship's weapons and send a distress signal to the nearest Alliance patrol. Now he just needed to reach the bridge. But first, he had to get past 100 soldiers between him and Victoria. He took a breath, cleared his mind. Let the training take over. On the Wandering Star, Emily watched the enemy command ship through a telescope. She could see flashes of light through the portholes. Explosions, maybe. Or gunfire. Is he still alive? She asked quietly. Captain Rachel checked the sensors. The ship's weapons just went offline. Someone disabled them from inside. I would say yes, he is still alive. James shook his head in disbelief. One man against an entire warship. How is that possible? Emily thought about the quiet passenger who read philosophy and caught falling crates. She thought about his sad eyes and his polite smile and the way he flinched when she accidentally touched his arm. They made him into a weapon, she said softly. But he chose to be something else. He chose to protect people instead of hurt them. That is why he is still alive. Because he has something worth fighting for. She pressed her hand against the cold glass of the observation window. Come back, David, she whispered. Please, come back. Victoria stood on the bridge of her command ship and watched the security feeds with growing terror. She had seen the recordings from the Prometheus facility. She knew what these soldiers were capable of. But seeing it on a screen was different from watching it happen to her own people. He moved like a ghost through her ship. One moment the corridor would be full of armed guards. The next moment they would all be on the floor and he would be gone. Her soldiers had stopped responding to orders. Some of them were hiding. Others had locked themselves in storage rooms and refused to come out. How many do we have left? She asked her. First officer. He checked his display with shaking hands. Maybe 30 combat ready. Another 50 wounded or unconscious. Ma'am, we should evacuate. Call the other ships for pickup. Victoria slammed her fist on the console. No, I have been hunting this ghost for 3 years. I am not running now. Not when he is walking right into my hands. She opened a channel to the other 2 ships. Target the cargo vessel. Full weapons. If I cannot have the shepherd, then no one will. But ma'am, the first officer said. Our weapons are offline. He did something to the systems. Victoria smiled coldly. Then use the other ships. They still have power. On the Wandering Star, alarms started blaring again. Captain Rachel ran to the sensors and felt her heart stop. The other 2 Syndicate ships had powered up their main cannons. They were aimed directly at the cargo vessel. They are going to fire, James shouted. We have no shields. No weapons. We cannot survive a direct hit. Rachel grabbed communication controls. David, can you hear me? They are targeting us. We need to move now. Static crackled. Then David's voice came through, calm as always. I know. I can see it from here. I am almost to the bridge. Just hold on a little longer. We do not have longer, Rachel screamed. They are charging weapons right now. David was silent for a moment. Then he said something that made Rachel's blood run cold. Tell James to divert all power to the rear thrusters. When I give the signal, push the engines as hard as they can go. You will have about 4 seconds to move. 4 seconds, Rachel repeated. That is not enough time. It will have to be, David said. And Rachel, thank you for treating me like a person. The communication cut off. David dropped the radio and started running. He had been taking his time before. Disabling soldiers. Being careful. Now he abandoned all caution. Now he moved at full speed. The soldiers he passed did not even see him. He was just a blur. A shadow. A force that knocked them aside like leaves in a hurricane. He broke through doors. Crashed through walls. Left chaos in his wake. He reached the bridge in 47 seconds. The door was reinforced steel designed to withstand explosions. David hit it at full speed, and it crumpled like paper. Victoria was waiting for him. She stood in the center of the bridge holding a plasma pistol. Her officers cowered behind their consoles. The main view screen showed the two escort ships, their weapons glowing as they prepared to fire. "You are too late, Shepard," Victoria said. "In 10 seconds, your friends will be dust. And you will watch it happen." David looked at the view screen. Then he looked at the weapons console. Then he moved. Victoria fired, but he was not where she aimed. He crossed the bridge in 2 steps and ripped a panel off the main control console. Inside were the manual override circuits that connected this ship to the escort vessels. "What are you doing?" Victoria screamed. David's hands moved faster than human eyes could follow. He rewired the circuits, crossed connections, created new pathways. In 3 seconds, he had done what would take a normal engineer 3 hours. The escort ships stopped charging their weapons. Instead, their engines fired at full power, pushing them away from the cargo vessel. Victoria stared at the screen in disbelief. "That is impossible. You cannot hack a ship's navigation from a different ship." "I did not hack anything," David said calmly. "I just convinced their computers that they were about to collide with an asteroid." Emergency protocols took over. He turned to face her. Victoria raised her pistol again, but her hands were shaking too badly to aim. "You killed my people," she said. "Dozens of them." "I killed no one," David replied. "Check your medical reports. Every soldier I encountered is alive. Unconscious but alive. I do not kill unless there is no other choice. I stopped being that weapon a long time ago." Victoria laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that? You are a Prometheus soldier, a monster grown in a lab. Killing is all you know." David walked toward her slowly. "You are right that they made me to kill. They spent 10 years turning me into the perfect weapon. They cut me open and rebuilt me and filled my head with training until violence was as natural as breathing." He stopped right in front of her. The pistol was touching his chest now, but they forgot something. David said. "They forgot that even a weapon can choose who to point itself at. I chose to protect people instead of hurt them. I chose to be more than what they made me. And you," he gently pushed the pistol aside, "you chose to profit from suffering. That is why you lost today. Not because I am stronger or faster, but because you fight for money and I fight for people." He took the pistol from her unresisting hands. Then he turned to the communications officer. "Open a channel to the Alliance patrol that is responding to my distress signal. I want to give them a full confession of the Crimson Syndicate's activities. Weapons smuggling, kidnapping, illegal military research. All of it." Victoria's face went pale. "You cannot do that. Do you know how many people I have bought? Politicians, generals. I will be out in a week." David smiled slightly. "I also uploaded your complete financial records to every major news network in the galaxy. By the time you reach trial, everyone will know exactly what you did and who helped you do it." He walked to the door. "Lock her in the brig," he told the bridge officers. "And treat the wounded. All of them. Even hers." He left Victoria screaming behind him on the wandering star. The crew watched in amazement as the escort ships drifted away and the command ship went dark. Then a small shuttle detached from the command vessel and headed toward them. "Is that him?" Emily asked. Rachel checked the shuttle signature. It was broadcasting a civilian frequency with a simple message. "Coming home." She felt tears in her eyes, and she did not know why. "Yes," she said. "That is him. Open the bay doors." The shuttle landed gently in the cargo bay. The door opened and David stepped out. He looked exhausted. His clothes were torn and burned. He had cuts on his arms and a bruise forming on his jaw, but he was smiling. Emily ran to him and hugged him before she could stop herself. He stiffened for a moment. Then slowly his arms came up, and he hugged her back. Thank you, he whispered, for what she asked, for reminding me what I was fighting for. 3 weeks had passed since the battle with the Crimson Syndicate. The Wandering Star had limped to the nearest space station for repairs. The passengers had been interviewed by Alliance investigators and sent on their way. The news networks were full of stories about Victoria and her organization. The galaxy was calling David a hero. He hated it. He sat in a small room on the space station staring at 2 men in military uniforms. They had introduced themselves as representatives of Alliance intelligence. They wanted to talk about his future. We have reviewed your file, Mr. David. Or should I call you 7, the older officer said. Very impressive. 19 surgeries. 400 confirmed missions. You were the most successful product of the Prometheus program. I am not a product, David said quietly. The officer smiled in a way that did not reach his eyes. Of course. My apologies. The point is, we could use someone with your abilities. The Syndicate is just one threat. There are others. Alien species that would love to see humanity wiped out. Terrorist organizations. Rogue governments. We need soldiers like you. David looked at him. You mean weapons like me? The officer shrugged. Semantics. David stood up. The 2 officers flinched even though he moved slowly. They had read his file. They knew what he could do. I spent 15 years being what you made me, David said. Killing when ordered. Following commands without question. Pretending I did not have nightmares every night about the things I did. Then I spent 5 more years trying to be something else. Trying to be a person instead of a weapon. He walked to the door. I am done following orders. Find someone else. He left before they could respond. Emily found him in the station's observation deck. He was sitting alone watching ships come and go through the massive windows. She sat down next to him without asking. They offered you a job, she said. David nodded. I refused. Emily was quiet for a moment. What will you do now? David shrugged. I have some money saved. Enough to disappear. Find a quiet planet somewhere. Read books. Maybe learn to garden. Normal things. That sounds lonely. David looked at her. I have been alone for most of my life. I am used to it. Emily shook her head. You do not have to be. She pulled out a small card and handed it to him. I have been offered a position at a hospital on a colony world. Head of trauma surgery. It is a good job, but the planet is on the frontier. Dangerous sometimes. They could use someone who is good at protecting people. David looked at the card. Are you asking me to come with you? I'm asking you to consider it. You spent your whole life being told what to do. Now you get to choose. She stood up and smiled at him. Just think about it. She left him alone with his thoughts. An hour later, Captain Rachel found him in the same spot. She sat down heavily in the chair Emily had vacated. I heard you turn down the military, she said. Word travels fast, David replied. Rachel laughed. On a space station this size, everyone knows everything. She pulled out a bottle and 2 glasses. I also heard you might be looking for work. David raised an eyebrow. Are you offering me a job? The Wandering Star needs a new security officer. The old one quit after the whole almost dying thing. Cannot imagine why. The pay is terrible. The food is worse. And the captain is a stubborn old woman who does not know when to quit. David smiled slightly. Sounds awful. It is, Rachel agreed. But we have good books in the library. And the crew already likes you. Amy thinks you are some kind of superhero. James wants you to teach him how to fight. And Emily. Rachel paused. Well, you know how Emily feels. David was quiet for a long time. He thought about the white room where he was born. The doctors who cut him apart and put him back together. The years of training and missions and blood. Then he thought about the cargo bay of the Wandering Star. the crew who had treated him like a person, Emily who hugged him when he came back. He had spent his whole life being told what to do, being pointed at targets and told to destroy them. For the first time, he got to choose. "When does the ship leave?" he asked. Rachel grinned. "Tomorrow morning. Cargo run to the frontier. Should be boring. No pirates. No syndicates. Just medical supplies and passengers." David thought about it. Then he thought about Emily's offer. The hospital on the frontier. A chance to protect people who needed help. He made a decision. "I will come with you to the frontier," he said. "After that, I want to see this hospital Emily mentioned. Maybe I can do some good there." Rachel nodded. "Sounds like a plan." She poured 2 drinks and handed him one. "To new beginnings." David took the glass. "To new beginnings," he agreed. The next morning, the Wandering Star departed from the space station with a new crew member. David stood in the observation lounge, watching the stars blur as they jumped to hyperspace. Emily sat across from him reading a medical journal. James was somewhere in the engine room arguing with the machinery. Rachel was on the bridge humming an old song. It felt like home. David opened his book. It was philosophy again. A collection of essays about what it means to be human. He had read it before, but some things were worth reading twice. Emily looked up from her journal. "What are you reading?" David showed her the cover. She smiled. Finding any answers, she asked. David thought about it. The doctors who made him had taken everything. His name, his childhood, his humanity. They had turned him into a weapon and expected him to stay that way forever. But they were wrong. He was not a weapon. He was not a number. He was not the monster they had created. He was a man who liked books and quiet conversations and watching stars. He was someone who had chosen to protect instead of destroy, to heal instead of hurt, to love instead of hate. "They made me into something terrible," he said finally. "But they could not make me stay that way. I got to choose who I wanted to be. And I chose this." Emily reached across the table and took his hand. He did not flinch this time. "I am glad," she said. David smiled. A real smile without sadness or shadows. The first one in 15 years. Outside the observation window, the stars streamed past like rivers of light. Somewhere out there were other Prometheus survivors. Other weapons trying to become people. Other monsters learning to be human. Maybe someday he would find them. Help them the way the crew of the Wandering Star had helped him. Show them that they could choose who they wanted to be. But that was for later. For now, he was content to sit in the quiet with a book in his hand and a friend beside him. For now, he was content to just be David, not a weapon. Not a number. Not a soldier. Just a man trying to do some good with what they made him. And for the first time in his life, that was enough.